First principle 1. Life is a self-reproducing energy-converting system defined by boundary, instruction, and metabolism. This principle synthesizes the core concepts from the foundational general biology and core cell and molecular biology sections, focusing on the essential requirements for any living entity, from the most basic cell to a complex organism. This covers the foundational truths found in texts like Campbell Biology, Molecular Biology of the Cell, Albert's, Leninger Principles of Biochemistry, and What is Life? By Schrödinger. The irreducible essence of life, as revealed across these texts, is its thermodynamic isolation and internal order maintenance. This foundational principle asserts that a living system must perform three non-negotiable functions to exist: containment, replication, information storage, and energy conversion. The irreducible elements of life: boundary, instruction, and metabolism. Challenge of life is to create and maintain order, low entropy, in a universe naturally tending toward disorder, high entropy, as described by the Second Law of Thermodynamics. Life accomplishes this not by violating the law, but by drawing in energy, converting it, and exporting excess entropy into the environment. Boundary, the compartmentalization imperative. Foundational truth, to establish an internal environment. Distinct from the external world, every living system requires a boundary, typically a lipid bilayer, cell membrane. This is the structural first principle of cellular life, function and selectivity. Texts like Molecular Biology of the Cell rigorously detail the membrane's architecture, a fluid mosaic of phospholipids and embedded proteins. The principle here is selective permeability. The cell does not passively exist. It actively regulates the concentration gradients of ions, nutrients, and waste, a function carried out by transmembrane proteins. The establishment of these gradients, like the sodium-potassium pump's role in animal cells or the proton gradient used by ATP synthase, is fundamental to nearly every form of cellular work. Without this boundary, the delicate chemical reactions of life would immediately dissipate, preventing the complex, ordered state of the cytoplasm. Origin and protocells. The origin of life itself is posited on the formation of protocells, self-assembling, vesicles capable of encapsulating early self-replicating molecules. This is a powerful demonstration of the boundary as a first principle. The mere concentration of necessary chemicals is insufficient. They must be enclosed to evolve as a collective unit. Instruction, the information storage imperative. Foundational truth. Life requires a stable, yet mutable blueprint to pass functional organization to the next generation. This blueprint is DNA, or RNA in some viruses, and its execution is governed by the central dogma of molecular biology. Storage and heredity. Texts on genetics and molecular biology of the gene, the double helix, confirm DNA's structure. The double helix is perfectly suited for this role. Its complementary strands allow for accurate self-replication, ensuring heredity. The principle of genetic code, being nearly universal across all life, affirms its foundational nature. All of life, from bacteria to the human subject in Gray's Anatomy, is built and maintained by reading and executing this instruction set. The central dogma, the flow of information, DNA, right arrow RNA, right arrow protein, is the central operating system of life. Proteins, the products, are the functional molecules, enzymes, transporters, structural elements that do the work of the cell. Any change in the DNA instruction, a mutation, immediately impacts the physical execution of life, providing the raw material for evolution. Metabolism, the energy conversion imperative. Foundational truth. All living systems must harvest and convert energy from their environment into a universally usable form, ATP, adenosine triphosphate, to power the maintenance of order. This is the kinetic first principle of life. Thermodynamics and biochemistry. Leninger. Principles of biochemistry dives into the metabolic reality, The cell is a finely tuned chemical factory. Organisms are classified by their energy source: phototrophs, light, and chemotrophs, chemicals. The universal product of both pathways is a means to phosphorylate ADP into ATP, an energetically unfavorable reaction that is coupled to energy-releasing, exergonic processes like cellular respiration. Coupling. Reactions. The first principle of metabolism is energy coupling. The immense energy stored in a glucose molecule or a photon of light is not released all at once, which would be destructive, but is carefully channeled through a series of enzyme-catalyzed steps. The energy is captured in the terminal phosphate bonds of ATP, which is then spent to drive the endergonic reactions of biosynthesis, movement, and information processing. The convergence of boundary, instruction, and metabolism is the most basic definition of life. They are codependent. Metabolism powers the maintenance of the boundary concentrates the chemicals for instruction, and instruction codes for the enzymes needed for metabolism. This self-referential loop, constantly fueled by energy, conversion, is the fundamental principle underpinning every advanced topic from developmental biology to human physiology. First principle 2. Life's history is driven by variation, selection, and inheritance, evolution. This principle is the master organizing framework that unifies all other biological disciplines. It is the core message of the evolution, ecology, and diversity and the classic and influential work sections, drawing truths from Darwin's On the Origin of Species, Dawkins's The Selfish Gene, Futuyma's Evolution, and Carson's Silent Spring. The second first principle is that life is not static, but a dynamic branching phenomenon governed by evolution by natural selection. This principle explains not only the existence of the immense diversity detailed in the diversity of life, but also the fine-tuning of every system described in specialized textbooks like Guyton and Hall Textbook of Medical Physiology. The irreducible. Forces of change. Variation, selection, and inheritance. Natural selection is often framed as a simple process, but its implications, evolution, are vast and constitute the single most unifying concept in biology. The evolutionary lens allows a student reading Your Inner Fish to trace the ancestry of the human hand to a lobe-finned fish, and for a conservationist reading, Conservation Biology for All to understand how species adapt to environmental pressure. Variation, the generator of raw material. Foundational truth. Within any population of self-reproducing entities, heritable variation must exist. This variation is the fuel for all evolutionary change. The source of novelty, as detailed in genetics texts and works on evolutionary theory, variation originates primarily from mutation, changes in the DNA sequence. First principle 1, instruction. It is then shuffled by sexual recombination and gene flow. Importantly, this variation arises randomly. It is not directed by the organism's needs. The blind, unguided nature of the mutation process is a cornerstone truth articulated throughout evolutionary literature, especially in contrast to earlier ideas. The range of phenotypes. Variation manifests in the phenotype, the organism's observable traits. This is the raw material that the environment acts upon. Without differences in traits, e.g., in size, resistance, behavior, or metabolic efficiency, selection cannot operate. Endless forms. Most Beautiful explores how changes in developmental genes, evo-devo, can generate substantial phenotypic variation. Selection, the environmental filter. Foundational truth. Because resources are limited, individuals with traits that confer a survival or reproductive advantage in a specific environment will, on average, produce more offspring. This differential success is natural selection. Differential fitness. The process is summarized as survival and reproduction of the fitter. The environment, be it a scarcity of food, a predator, a pathogen, or a change in climate, imposes pressure. Individuals whose random variation better matches the pressure have higher fitness, reproductive success. The beak of the finch provides A classic real-time example of this process. Non-random success. While the variation is random, the success is decidedly non-random. Natural selection is the antithesis of chance. It is a mechanism that deterministically filters individuals based on their fit with the immediate environment. The selfish gene presents a gene-centric view, arguing that selection operates fundamentally on the information unit, the gene, to maximize its representation in the next generation, making the organism an elaborate vehicle for genetic perpetuation. Inheritance, the persistence of traits. Foundational truth, the advantageous traits must be heritable, passed faithfully from parent to offspring, for evolution to occur over generations. Blending versus particulate inheritance. A key historical principle is that inheritance must be particulate, Mendelian genes as confirmed by modern genetics texts, and not blending. If traits blended, the initial variation, principle 2, element 1, would be quickly diluted out of the population, halting evolution. The discovery of the discrete gene and the structure of DNA provides the material basis for this heritability. Population change over time. The combination of differential survival and faithful inheritance results in a gradual directional shift in the average traits of the population across generations. This is the definition of evolution. Evolution by Fukushima or Kirkpatrick systematically explores the mathematical and ecological models that demonstrate how small, inherited advantages accumulate over vast time periods, creating the tree of life that connects all organisms, from single-celled organisms to the complex systems of the human body. The evolutionary principle provides the ultimate context for biology, explaining why organisms are adapted, though not perfectly, to their niches, and why the basic cellular machinery, first principle Y, is universally conserved yet infinitely diversified. It moves beyond what life is to explain why life is the way it is. First principle the third, biological systems are interconnected, multi-scale hierarchies governed by emergent properties. This principle connects the microscopic, cell, molecule, with the macroscopic, organism, ecosystem, planet, and is the common thread, running through the most advanced and contextual works, including human biology, physiology, and anatomy, advanced, specific disciplines, and key concepts and principles. It draws truths from texts like Gray's Anatomy, Guyton and Hall, Ecology by Krebs, QB Immunology, and philosophical contextual works like Sapiens and Silent Spring. The third first principle is that life is organized into predictable, nested levels of complexity, and at each higher level, completely new features, emergent properties, arise that cannot be predicted by studying the components alone. The irreducible structure of life, hierarchy, integration, and emergence understanding. This hierarchical structure is necessary to move from the abstract principles of life, I, and change tie, to the concrete reality of life as we observe it. Hierarchy, the nested order of organization. Foundational truth. Biological organization is defined by a fixed, nested hierarchy of increasing complexity, where the integrity of each level is dependent on the proper functioning of the level below it. The chain of life. This principle is universally taught in general biology and anatomically confirmed in specialized texts. Read text atoms, a right arrow, text molecules, a right arrow, a text organelles, a right arrow, a text cells, a right arrow, a text tissues, a right arrow, a text organs, a right arrow, a text organ systems, a right arrow, a text organism, a right arrow, a text population, a right arrow and text community, a right arrow in text ecosystem, a right arrow in text biosphere specialization and dependence. Every textbook section relies on this hierarchy. For instance, QB Immunology cannot discuss the immune system and organ system level without first discussing the structure of antibodies, molecule level, and the function of lymphocytes, cell level. Gray's Anatomy meticulously maps the tissue and organ levels. The failure of a single level, like the breakdown of cellular metabolism, first principle Y, in a critical organ, cascades up the hierarchy to organismal death. Integration, though interdependence of systems. Foundational truth. Within any level of the biological hierarchy, components are not just stacked, but are highly integrated through feedback mechanisms, regulation, and communication networks. Homeostasis, physiology. In the realm of human biology, Guyton and Hall, the principle of homeostasis, the maintenance of a stable internal state, is the ultimate expression of integration. The circulatory, respiratory, renal, and nervous systems are continuously communicating and adjusting to maintain constant temperature, temperature, and fluid levels. This integration is so fundamental that pathology, disease as explored in The Emperor of All Maladies, is often defined as a failure of system integration or a disruption of homeostasis. Ecosystem dynamics, ecology. At the ecological level, ecology, by Krebs, integration is seen in trophic dynamics, food webs, biogeochemical cycling, and species interactions. The population of a predator is tightly linked to the population of its prey. The health of a forest community depends on the nutrient cycling driven by soil microbes. This profound interdependence is the focus of conservation science. Conservation, biology for all. Emergent properties, the novelty of complexity. Foundational truth. As complexity increases from one hierarchical level to the next, entirely new, unpredictable characteristics emerge that did not exist in the parts alone. Example: the neuron. An individual sodium ion or a single-cell membrane protein possesses no inherent thought. However, the integration of billions of neurons in a circuit, as described in neuroscience exploring the brain, gives rise to consciousness, memory, and behavior, properties that are emergent at the brain level. Example: the gene. A DNA sequence, first principle I, instruction, is chemically inert, but the collective integrated action of a population of genes across a genome, interacting with environmental signals, results in the complex, coordinated development of an organism, developmental biology. Global context and responsibility. Works like Silent Spring and Sapiens scale this principle to the biosphere. The entire planet, biosphere, possesses emergent properties, a stable, oxygenated atmosphere, global climate systems, that arise from the integrated action of all living organisms. The philosophical extension is that human action, a product of the emergent property of intelligence, now has the power to disrupt the essential processes of the biosphere, forcing a contemplation of the biological self in a global context. The principle of hierarchy and emergence confirms that the study of biology must be holistic. One cannot fully understand the part without appreciating its place in the whole, and vice versa. It is the final unifying principle that transforms a collection of biological facts into a coherent science of life.